John Deere gave Ethan Miller 72 hours, even though his tractor hadn't actually broken down. It didn't fail in the field, it just stopped responding. No warning, no visible issue, just a message on the screen. Access restricted. Ethan called a mechanic first, but there was nothing to fix. The machine was fine. When he called the dealer, that's when it got worse. They told him the system had been locked, and the only way to get it running again was to go through them. At that point, it stopped being a repair problem and started looking like control. And within hours, it was clear Ethan wasn't the only one. Other farmers started reporting the same thing. Working machines, suddenly locked, same message, same situation. What looked isolated quickly turned into a pattern. By the time 36 hours had passed, calls had stopped. Tractors started moving out onto the roads, not to work, but to block them. One by one, farmers showed up with the same issue, and the situation shifted from waiting to action. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was a response. If you think farmers should have the right to fix what they own, write "Stand with Farmers" in the comments. Ethan wasn't a big operator, just a regular farmer who depended on each season going right. His fields weren't empty. Crops were already standing, and timing at that stage is everything. In farming, even a few days of delay isn't just an inconvenience, it directly turns into loss. By then, money has already been spent on seeds, fuel, equipment, often on credit, expecting the harvest to cover it. If work stops at that point, the impact isn't limited to a single day or a small setback. The entire season can slip out of control, and once that window is missed, it's extremely hard to recover what's lost. For Ethan, this wasn't about fixing a machine later when convenient. That tractor was tied to everything: his crops, his schedule, and the income he was counting on for the year. That morning started like any other. Ethan got into the tractor expecting to get back to work, but within moments, something felt off. The machine powered on, everything looked normal at first glance, but it wasn't responding the way it should. No strange noise, no warning signs, nothing that usually hints at a mechanical issue, just a sudden disconnect between the controls and the machine. He paused, checked again, tried restarting it, thinking it might be a temporary glitch. But when the screen lit up, the message was clear and unfamiliar: access restricted. At that point, it didn't feel like a breakdown. It felt like something had been deliberately stopped. Ethan didn't wait around. He got a local mechanic out there the same day, expecting something simple: a loose connection, a sensor issue, anything that could be fixed on the spot. The panels were opened, diagnostics were checked, and piece by piece, everything came back normal. The engine was fine, hydraulics were fine, nothing physically damaged or out of place. That's where it started getting frustrating, because when a machine is fine on the inside but still won't work, you're not dealing with a typical failure anymore. There was nothing to repair, nothing to replace, just a system that refused to respond without giving a reason that made sense on the ground. With no clear fault on the machine, Ethan called the dealer, expecting them to point out something he had missed. Instead, the answer came from their side almost immediately. The system had flagged an unauthorized issue, and because of that, access had been restricted. There wasn't any troubleshooting he could do from his end anymore. What made it worse was the condition that followed. He was told there was a 72-hour window to get it checked through their official process, and until then, the tractor wouldn't be usable. It didn't matter that the machine itself was fine or sitting idle in the field. At that point, it stopped feeling like something that needed fixing and started feeling like something he needed permission for. By now, the problem wasn't just the machine, it was the clock. Every hour the tractor sat idle, something else was slipping. The field didn't pause, the crop didn't wait, and the window he had to work in was already tight. In farming, timing isn't flexible. Miss it, and you don't just delay the work. You lose part of what you were supposed to earn from it. And the pressure wasn't just coming from the field. There was money already tied up in everything: fuel, inputs, equipment, most of it spent before any return comes in. When work stops at that stage, you're not just stuck, you're exposed. Because now, instead of moving forward, you're waiting on a process you don't control. And that's what made it worse. It wasn't just delay. It was dependence. At first, Ethan thought it might just be his situation, something specific to his machine. But to be sure, he started making a few calls to other farmers nearby. What he expected were different answers, maybe different problems, different causes. Instead, he kept hearing the same thing: machines that had been working fine. suddenly not responding. No visible damage, no clear fault, just a system that wouldn't let them operate. Different farms, different locations, but the experience sounded identical. That's when it stopped feeling like a one-off issue, because when the same thing starts happening in different places, to different people, in the exact same way, it's no longer a coincidence. Early on, it felt like separate problems happening at the same time, but as more calls came in, the details started lining up too closely to ignore. Different farmers, different fields, but the same sequence. Machine working fine, then suddenly restricted with no physical issue to explain it. That's when the pattern became hard to dismiss, because machines don't fail in the exact same way across different places without a common reason behind it. And here, the only common link wasn't the hardware, it was the system controlling it. That realization shifted the situation. This wasn't about fixing something broken anymore. It was about understanding why something that wasn't broken had been stopped in the first place. As that understanding settled in, the frustration changed as well. It wasn't just about one delayed job or a missed day in the field. It was the idea that even with everything in place, working equipment, ready land, time-sensitive crops, the final control wasn't theirs. And that's a different kind of problem, because delays can be managed, costs can be calculated, but when control shifts out of your hands, the situation becomes unpredictable. You're no longer deciding what happens next. You're waiting for someone else to decide it for you, and for most of them, that wasn't something they were used to. By this point, it wasn't about figuring out what went wrong. That part was already clear. The real question was what to do next. Some of them considered waiting it out, hoping the issue would get resolved through the official process. But time wasn't something they had in reserve. Every passing day was already costing them, and there was no clear timeline for when things would actually move. Paying and pushing everything through the system was another option, but that didn't solve the real problem either. It just meant accepting the same situation again the next time it happened. And accepting it as it wasn't really an option at all, because if the machine could be stopped once without warning, it could happen again. That's when the direction started to change. Waiting wasn't solving anything anymore. After that, the calls slowly stopped being about the problem and started being about what could be done instead. There wasn't any big announcement or loud planning, just a quiet understanding spreading across the same group of people dealing with the same situation. Coordination didn't take long. Early the next morning, tractors began moving out, not toward the fields, but toward the roads. One after another, from different directions, they showed up without needing much explanation. No noise, no rush, just movement with a clear purpose. And for the first time since it started, they weren't waiting anymore. By the time the tractors reached the highways, everything had already shifted. There was no rush, no chaos, no shouting, just a slow, deliberate buildup as more machines lined up across the roads. One lane, then another, until movement started to slow down and eventually stop. Traffic backed up, supply routes stalled, and the kind of disruption that usually takes days to build happened quietly in a matter of hours. What made it different was the intent. They weren't trying to be heard. They were forcing attention, because this time the problem wasn't staying in the fields. It had moved out into the open, where it couldn't be ignored or delayed through another process. And once it reached that point, the response came faster than before. Calls that had been slow and procedural suddenly changed tone. Conversations became direct, solutions started moving, and the same system that had taken control was now being pushed to respond. It didn't take long for access to be restored, but by then the situation had already made its point. The pressure didn't build slowly, it hit all at once. What was happening on the roads couldn't be ignored the way it had been in the fields. Movement had stopped, and with it, the usual pace of things. That's when the response finally came. The same process that had felt distant and slow suddenly became direct. Calls were returned faster, answers were clearer, and the tone had noticeably changed. What had been treated like a routine restriction was now being handled like something that needed resolving. Access was restored. Machines started moving again. But before this ends, there's a simple question. If a machine is fully paid for, sitting in your field, and still needs permission to run, do you really own it? And if you think farmers should have the right to control and repair what they own, write "Stand with Farmers" in the comments. The more people see it, the harder it is to ignore. Because this wasn't just about getting one tractor back on the field, It was about what it took to make that happen in the first place. And that's what stayed with them. They didn't just stop their machines that day, they stopped everything else. If you want more real stories like this, subscribe.